The Nightfort is likely the most haunted castle in all of Westeros. It's the site of Old Nan's scariest stories. But have you ever noticed how many of these stories seem to have one little thing in common? Now, this is an idea that I brought up in a live stream with Taco from Something to Talk About and Zach from the Interesting Nerd Club, which you can find at the end card of this video. And I'm going to keep it short here, as you can probably tell by the video length, but that's a 3-hour-ish long discussion if you want more on the Nightfort. The theory that I proposed during this live stream as we were going through all the ghost stories is that basically George is hinting on some level or another that the Nightfort is haunted by the others. Now, maybe not directly in the way that you would be thinking when I say that, but also maybe directly. It's honestly kinda tough to say because this is a ghost story within a fantasy story and these are hidden away in legends and we don't really get too much detail about any of the ghost stories in particular, just like 1 or 2 sentences here and there. But of the few details we do get, there's a lot of similarities that we can point to between the ghosts at the Nightfort and the way that the others seem to behave. Now this one is just true given what we've already seen from the others in the books and what we've heard about the Nightfort, but if you take into account some of the theories that I've proposed that may be happening in future books around the Nightfort and the others, actually there are even more similarities to more ghost stories. So let's just list them all right now. The first and most obvious of these stories that I can connect to the others is the thing that came in the night, because, well, that's what the others seem to do. They come during the long night. In addition to that, the people who witnessed this thing that came in the night were basically so scared they couldn't even describe what they saw, and then they all died. And of course, we remember at the beginning of the story, the one witness who saw the others and then got away was basically so scared that he didn't even go back to the wall to tell them, and he seemingly was mad with fear when he was executed by Ned Stark. This fear that was obvious in him, of course, led to the discussion about how he died afraid versus did he die bravely, and then Bran asks Ned, well, can a man be brave if he's afraid? And Ned says that that's the only time a man can be brave. So the thing comes in the night and basically terrifies everyone, but then it comes back far later, around 100 years later, and all of the people that supposedly saw it and then died were said to be shambling behind it in chains. Sort of like the others kill people and then resurrect them and command them around, you know? It's all other stuff with the thing that came in the night. That one is by far the most direct connection that we can draw. But there's also, of course, the story of Mad Axe, who supposedly took his boots off so that he could walk around silently as he murdered his brothers. But you know who else moves around completely silently? The others. So that is 2 ghost stories which we can draw at least passing similarity between the way the others behave and the way these ghosts at the Nightfort behave. In addition to that, there is Simian Star Eyes, who supposedly had blue sapphires for eyes, and the others have these glowing magical blue eyes. Not only are the others said to have incredibly blue eyes, but also the Night's Queen herself in the legends is supposed to have blue eyes, and many people speculate that she is in fact an other. So given what little bit we know about the Nightfort and the others in all of these legends, you can see how the similarities are starting to pile up where maybe George is hinting at something here. So now it's time to get a little bit further into the theories. Now those of you who are familiar with my channel will know that I think there are weirwood trees with bodies strapped to them in the wall, and that these bodies, and the weirwood trees themselves, are probably used to cast the others as weirwood shadows. If that sounds insane, that means you probably haven't seen my videos before. Check them out in the big playlist. That will be one of the other end cards at the end of this video. So if the others are related to these bodies cast within the wall or the blood magic being done within the wall, well then a couple more ghost stories of the Nightfort are able to be added to this list of connections. There is of course the 79 Sentinels who are stuck in the wall forever as a punishment, and the Sentinel is one of the most common types of tree that George likes to reference in these books. So the 79 Sentinels being trees and people within the wall is obviously a very direct connection if what I've been speculating is in fact the case. The other one that's pretty interesting is Arson Iceaxe, who supposedly was using a big axe to hack his way through the wall, and then when the Night's Watch Patrol found him, they didn't even bother to disturb him, they just sealed up the entrance to his tunnel, walled him into the wall itself, and supposedly if you press your ear to the wall, you can still hear him hacking away in there. So that is another case of bodies in the wall at the Nightfort that we are reminded of and again could be a connection to the others. But it goes a little bit further than that, because if you take the idea that Arson Ice Axe was walled into the wall before the legend of the Mad Axe, well, then suddenly you have a guy with an axe who is stuck in the wall, and then potentially that spirit or that ghost within the wall could be related to the guy who goes mad and uses an axe to kill a bunch of brothers of the Night's Watch, essentially creating a connection between the legend of Arson Ice Axe and the legend of Mad Axe, which to me does seem like it would make a lot of sense, right? Like that's kind of just how ghost stories are supposed to work, right? You kill someone in some horrible way and then they come back to haunt the area in some sort of similar fashion, right? Like that's a pretty common idea within ghost stories, so a connection there to me at least seems pretty warranted. And in addition to this, you have the fact that these bodies that are strapped up to the weirwoods that we see in the Green Seers definitely seem like they need to be sustained by constant blood sacrifice to the weirwoods. I have even speculated in the past that possibly it is the case that the reason that the First Knight was adopted is because it is old First Men kings who strap themselves into this weirwood system, and basically their descendants being allowed to practice the First Knight would lead to a bunch of unwanted babies with their common blood type, the right blood type to be fed into the weirwoods and sustain them. So it's sort of like a power in king's blood coming from the fact that the people who are strapped up to the magical trees want a specific lineage of blood because that's the blood type that they have, and that's what would sustain them the best. That's obviously very speculative, and we have no idea if that's the case, but it would be a way that George could be essentially giving a sort of modern science explanation for the reason that specific families apparently have special blood that can be used for magical sacrifice. It's not because they're better in some way inherently by being descended from kings, it's because, well, there's a bunch of people who took a very selfish action to strap themselves up to a tree, and then they essentially constructed society around some brutal customs that lead to the proper blood magic rituals to forever sustain their bodies. The reason there must always be a Stark in Winterfell could just be because, well, the first Stark was Bran the Builder, who may himself be strapped up to a weirwood tree deep below Winterfell, down in the crypts somewhere, and he needs constant Stark blood, or at least closely related Stark blood, to be fed into that tree if he means to sustain his body. That is one of the things that could be revealed later in the books. Again, a lot of speculation there, but as I said, I've got a bunch of videos where I kind of break this down in more detail that you can check out if you want to, and I will be making even more of them, so make sure to like and subscribe before you go. But the reason that I brought up all these bloodlines in the first place, and the reason that I was talking about how these people in the wall may be sustained by the constant blood sacrifice of essentially their descendants, well, that kind of lines up with the idea of the rat cook then now, doesn't it? And even what Patchface says about how the old fish eat the young fish. The idea of eating your own young is another thing that is connected to the Nightfort by these ghost stories. Also, if the idea of sexual-based magic being used to create the others is actually what's going on some level, well, if you just sort of make that a little bit darker, then you have the story of Dany Flint. It is at least somewhat connected to the idea of another thing that may have gone on at the Nightfort, depending on how the others were created in the past, right? We won't go into too much detail what happened to Dany Flint, but you probably all know what happened to Dany Flint, so we don't need to. But definitely let me know down in the comments what you think of all of these connections. Is there actually something to this, or is it just all a big coincidence? Is George maybe hinting on some level or another that the Nightfort is haunted by the others? I look forward to seeing what you all have to say about that, and I'll be back with something else very soon.